Page 90, please. Today, we're going to try to address the question of what Yerushalayim, what Jerusalem is all about. We have the opportunity to talk about different locations in the land of Israel. Hebron, Shechem, what they symbolize, what they teach us, their messages. Today we're going to focus a little bit on Yerushalayim. But beforehand, we're going to, in the middle of this week's portion, this is after Sodom is destroyed. So we find in the beginning of chapter 20, this is on page 90, we find Avraham Avinu leaving the region that would be near Hebron and traveling southward, and he settles in an area that is controlled by an individual by the name of Avimelech, the king of Gerar. He settles in that region. We know the unfortunate story of his wife taken. We know that God intervenes to protect her and him. On page 92, Avraham is challenged by this Avimelech and asks him, why did you identify the woman as a sister when she is indeed a wife? Avraham responds in verse 11 that you should know, Amarti, I said to myself that there is no fear of God. En yirat Elokim b'makom hazeh. There's a lack of a fear of God, and therefore you could kill me. Now, following these events, Yitzchak is born. Ishmael interacts with Yitzchak. We have some issues with Ishmael and Yitzchak that have continued for the past 3,900 years. And eventually, if you look on page 98, Avimelech returns into the story. So we have Avimelech events prior to the birth of Yitzchak, leading to the birth of Yitzchak. Then we have Avimelech returning. And Avimelech declares that, listen, on page 98, I have sensed that God is with you. And therefore, I want to have some kind of covenant with you. I'm interested in making some kind of sovereign pact. Not just... Welcome back. This is all the way from the Vatican.
Hebron came from Hebron.
From the Vatican.
It's holy water.
Thank you for skipping the wafer. So, on page 98, Avimelech wants a sovereign pact here. And this is unique because Avraham Avinu has pacts, but these are more practical, logistic pacts for survival. He has some buddies, Aner, Eshkol, Mamre, but this is a very significant pact because the offer is that the pact remains not just between Avimelech and Avraham, but with his descendants as well. And Avraham says, yes, he rebukes him for some actions that were problematic, but at the same time, they go ahead, and if you look at the end of page 98, we find that they transfer these 7 animals next to a place that they name Be'er Sheva, relates to the name Sheva, which is 7, also Shua, oath. And there's a covenant between the two. Now this is very interesting. A covenant that Avraham Avinu makes with someone that is dwelling in the land of Israel, when in general, what are his descendants? What are the descendants of Avraham Avinu going to be told? That with those people who dwell there, avoid long-term covenants, perhaps all of them. So this is just interesting. What exactly is taking place? Obviously, if you have a relationship with someone, there is a meeting of minds. There are ideas that are coming together. Perhaps a similar outlook that Avimelech, the king of Gerar, has with Avraham Avinu. Immediately following that, we have on page 100 the story of the Akedah, the trial of the binding of Yitzchak. And the Torah links it because the Torah tells us on page 100, in the beginning of chapter 22, Vayehi achar hadvarim ha'ele. It was after these events, and the simple reading would indicate that this does relate to the interaction that Avimelech has with Avraham. Following that, God tests Avraham Avinu, and we know the story. He tells him to go up, and never said to kill him. Right? We know it. We're familiar with it. We call it a nisayon. Now, translate the word nisayon.
Test.
You would say test. Fine. Maimonides would not agree with you. Maimonides is not so comfortable labeling it a test, because to go out and claim that a person goes through difficulty when he doesn't deserve it, that's not really fairness, and God is a God of fairness. So therefore, he would translate the word nisa and nisayon more as a banner. Like a banner, meaning when you want to hold something that everyone else sees, you want to act in a way that many people should learn from your actions, that is a nes. And therefore, Avraham Avinu wants to teach us something, teach the world and teach the Jewish people for eternity. That you should know, in the words of the Rambam, Yedu'u kol bnei Adam, that the action itself is to teach all people, gvul, how great, right, the unlimited love the man had for God, and the concept of fearing God, meaning this is a man who, as Rambam tells us, his whole life was in this child. This is what he was waiting for. But to fulfill the word, the desire, the commandment of God he is willing to offer him, that is what is being taught to us. The relationship the human should have, the relationship the Jew should have with the Almighty. Ahavat Hashem, Yirat Hashem, the fear of God, recognizing that there is a relationship that we have with God. It's a very, very deep relationship. That is what he is teaching us. It's a banner. The sanes, right? Hold a banner. So it's not a test. It is a banner according to Rambam. Nachmanides works more with the way that it is indeed a test, meaning you have a person who is extremely devoted, but it never comes out. You have a player who is very good in chess or in soccer. You recognize his greatness and the talents that exist from within when you put him on the field, when you put him by the chessboard. Only after the challenging game do you notice how great he is in his field. So too it comes with Avraham Avinu. The potential existed from within. His devotion was unlimited. God Almighty knew it, but he wants everyone else to know it. He wants, in the words of Nachmanides, to go ahead and lotzi mehakoach lapoal, from the potential of doing something of great devotion to actually doing it. So this is the concept of a nes. Yes?
So if according to the Rambam, if a nes is a banner, and a banner is there for people to see, why did Avraham tell Eliezer and Yishmael to stay behind? He should have brought them along so that they could see and report back to the world.
Did Avraham know at the time that this is a test? In other words, for him, it was just an action of fulfilling what God wants from him. Eventually, in other words, when God says, this is not what I desired, but rather I wanted to show your devotion, this is an act, and once it appears in the Torah, that's when it becomes the banner. And at that moment, of course, he's still living from within it. Avraham Avinu at the time has no idea, really, that it is anything but this desire that he just does not understand why HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. That's how we take it. Now, where does this occur? Where does this banner/test occur? So look in the text. So obviously this is occurring line 4 on page 100. He should go to the land of Moriah. Land of Moriah. Moriah. It's becoming a little bit more of a popular name for girls. Moriah. I have a niece by the name of Moriah. Very nice name. What does Moriah mean?
Teaching.
Okay, so we can take two approaches. One is that it is like hora'ah. And indeed, the location is the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount eventually will have, according to the Jews, allegedly a temple. And there's going to be there a court which teaches the laws of the Torah. Hora'ah, teachings will come forth from there. Moriah Hora'ah. That's explanation number one. Explanation number two, it relates to the word myrrh. Myrrh, it's a spice, right? And it was offered in the temple on the inner altar. And it symbolizes the idea that we do things to connect to God. Temple Mount, according to the Jews, is a location of two-way traffic. There are things that we do to show our devotion, our connection to the Almighty through sacrifices. Those are things that go upward. But at the same time, there are things that come down. There's inspiration, of course, that comes from there. But there are teachings as well. There was a court that was there, Lishkat HaGazit, a chamber where the teachings of the Sanhedrin reached the Jewish world and the whole world. That's where the information comes down from above. Two-way traffic. So therefore, if you want to imagine the Temple Mount, number one, call it Har HaMoriah with an understanding that it's the myrrh going up and the Hora'ah coming down. But as well, you could use the image of a ladder that is placed there, which of course will appear later on. A ladder. There's traffic going up and down. And indeed, in the vision, in the dream that Yaakov has, you have the angels going in both directions, which symbolize the traffic going in both directions. Now, Yerushalayim itself makes its appearance earlier in Parashat Lech Lecha, according to tradition. It makes its appearance, but it has a different name. We find a person by the name of Malchi Tzedek, the king of Shalem. And he interacts with Avraham Avinu. So we have a name for Yerushalayim at the time, and it is called only Shalem. Keep that in mind. But what we're going to try to do, and what I'm going to try to clarify is a few things. Number one, the pact between Avimelech and Avraham needs to be clarified. This is not what God really is interested in, us developing deep relationships and covenants and sovereign pacts with the locals in the land of Israel. And number two, what does that have to do with this event, with the events of the Akedah? Because the Torah obviously links the two, because on page 98 we are told about the covenant, and on page 100, Vayacharat Varim Ha'ele, we have the events that occur eventually with the Akedah. To understand them all, we're going to have to go back to Parashat Noach. Okay? And we're going to have to turn to page 42, and this is after the flood. A new world order begins here with the three children of Noah. So briefly, Shem is going to merit having a descendant by the name of Avraham Avinu on page 42, which is in the beginning of chapter, or it's in chapter 9, verse 20. And then we have Cham. Cham is the passionate one. There's passion there. There's a heated individual. And he has descendants, among them Mitzrayim. And Mitzrayim would be a symbol, Africans. And then the third one is Yafet. Yafet has a descendant by the name of Yavan. And in general, we attribute those cultures to the Givanim, the descendants of Yafet. So let's read a little bit again. A portion we are familiar with, we read very often, but we have to figure out what is happening here. So Noah gets drunk after the flood, overwhelmed for a long time, needs a good drink. Unfortunately, in verse 21, we are told that he drinks and became uncovered. He became uncovered. What would be the appropriate way to act? Well, first we're going to be told how not to act. So we have his son Cham, but Cham here is linked to his son Canaan. He is linked to Canaan, meaning the text identifies Cham as the father of Canaan. So obviously there's a relationship between the two. and he sees the erva, the nakedness, on top of page 44 of his father. And when nakedness is the appropriate way to deal with it is to cover it, he decides to share the news with his brothers, who are outside of the tent. Page 23 is the appropriate way to deal with it. Vayikach Shem veYafet. Shem and Yafet are partners here. And they take a garment and they take it over their shoulder and they walk in a way to not come in contact, visual contact with their father's nakedness, and they conceal it, they cover it. Appropriate way to deal with, not with a gilui erva, not with allowing nakedness to be shown, but with a sensitivity that you cover nakedness. Their father wakes up eventually, and after a few Tylenols, he aware of what his child did to him. Verse 25, he curses Canaan. He should be a slave. But let's move on to the blessings in verse 26. Who is he going to bless here? Number one, Vayomar Baruch Hashem, Elokei Shem, blessed be God, Hashem, the God of Shem, and Canaan should be his slave. And in verse 27, Yafet itself also gets some sort of blessing, and he tells him, Yaft Elokim leyefet. May God extend or perhaps beautify the what? The tribe or the families that will descend from Yefet. However, Yishkon, the Shekhinah itself is not going to dwell with Yefet, but rather Be'ohalei Shem. So there's a partnership here between Shem and Yafet. Both get some kind words. One gets a blessing of a connection to God, Baruch Hashem. Shem is linked to the Almighty due to his covering of the nakedness. Yefet is given this blessing of beauty, but the reference is very clear that the Shekhinah, the dwelling of God, is going to occur in the, not with Shem himself, by the way, but rather in the tents, quote unquote, the tents of Shem. What is this all about? So, we've discussed here the fact that as humans, there are two forces that pull us away from proper Judaism. The force of desire, and then there's what we call the intellectual corruption. And we gave two regions, each one of them symbolizes a flaw. Mitzrayim was erva. The flaw was desire, nakedness. The essence of Judaism is to conquer both. And what we find here is that Yefet and Shem play a role in covering nakedness, while Cham fails in that field. For him, he doesn't cover nakedness. What does that symbolize? It symbolizes the idea that Cham's essence is that he gives into desire. He gives into his passion. He wants something, he's going to get it. Yefet and Shem cover nakedness. There's a partnership between the two. They work together to cover nakedness. They have that ability to overcome temptation. They have such an ability indeed. Now, there is a verse in Mishlei that ta'ava, when people are into their own desires, yivakesh nifrad, in other words, it separates people. And we know very well, societies cannot survive when everyone's selfish. You know, you have a child, and the child is teasing a sibling, right? These things have happened in the history of humanity. And you turn to the child and you say, "Why are you teasing, your brother? Why are you doing it?" And the child responds, "Well, earlier today you said I hope I have a fun day. And for me, it is fun to tease my brother, so I'm going to do it. It's fun." So you turn back to the child and you say, fun is fun when it's fun for everyone. In other words, you have to do you want to go ahead and allow people to do things to maximize their life, to find meaning, enjoyment. That's wonderful. but it has to be that everyone has the right to do so. Right? That's what philosophers say. What is considered just, what is considered ethical, that which you could allow everyone in society to do. Correct? If we're going to go ahead and say, listen, I enjoy robbing banks and beating up people, right, and I feel that that's enjoyment, well, it's an enjoyment for you, but it's causing pain to others, that's not ethical. And this is what the philosophers were saying, from Kant to Sartre, that's what they tell you. Everyone has to have the ability to enjoy it, then it is considered ethical. And where do you find the roots of such social order, which is in essence beauty? There's something beautiful when you have, city-states and free cities and a senate and a republic, all these ideas and all these words. Where do they find their roots? In Greek culture. Yavan, a descendant of Yefet. Yefet has beauty. There is beauty. Greek culture, many of you visited Greece, right? And you've made your rounds and you were inspired by the civilization, right? Shocked by how low such a civilization can sink in this day and age. But nevertheless, there are roots of beauty. That's what you have with Yefet. So there is actually a partnership between Shem and Yefet. Both of them. Shem too had the ability to inspire people to overcome temptation. In other words, this social beauty that Yefet has within it, right, a significant ingredient is the ability to overcome temptation. If I give in to all my temptations, if I do whatever I want to in society, obviously there is a lack of that social structure, social beauty. Yefet symbolizes, Yefet and Shem, they are indeed partners in doing what? Covering nakedness. Cham does not have that ability. Cham and his descendant Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is a place that you could forget about ethics and you could forget about social beauty because people do whatever they want. True, they have a terrorizing personality on top known as a king, and he takes away the ability to do whatever he wants from everyone else and keeps it for himself, and he is the one that is doing whatever he wants. But the essence of such a society, the descendant of Ham, is given to ta'ava, no self-control at all, forget about social structure, social beauty. Yefet and Shem are indeed partners. Okay? Now, that's what we have. Chazal, the rabbis tell us that Yefet himself was not as active. And if you look in the verse, who are the two that take the garment to cover the father? Shem and Yefet. In Hebrew, there's a word called nigrar, when you are dragged with someone, like dragging a kid to preschool, right? Or dragging a person to your in-laws. Like, in other words, you do have this concept of liot gorer, nigrar. Yefet is nigrar. He follows Avraham Avinu. Now, the next question is, who was, Yefet is nigrar achar Shem. Who was Avimelech? Let's go back to our portion. A king of a place called Grar. Okay, but where does he come from? Who is he a descendant of? Is he Cham? He's not Shem. He's not from Shem. We don't find any record. There would seem, if you open at the end of Parshat Noach, it does mention, as it is giving us the list of the descendants of Cham, it says the following words appear. We'll look at it now. Misham yatsu plishtim. The plishtim came out of there. Meaning it doesn't say that the plishtim were born to a specific descendant of Cham. All it says is Misham yatsu plishtim. From that area, this is an area that is between Aza and Yafo, on the coast. And it talks about descendants of Ham that settled there. And the Torah says, Misham yatsu plishtim. Who were the plishtim themselves? The word plishtim, and they are at times identified as palashet. Pei lamed shin taf. We find records among the Egyptians that Ramses III fought the sea invaders. The sea invaders. And many believe that they are the Plishtim. I saw not long ago a video of an archaeologist who was a big expert in the digs in Gat, which were cities of the Philistines, and they see a very, very strong relationship between the ceramic findings and the type of altars that existed there among the Philistines with the Greek city-states that you have at the same time. It seems to be, and it is very, very, very possible, that either they are impacted, it's either a culture that is impacted by earlier stages of Greek culture, of Greek civilization, or perhaps they are even descendants of the Greeks. But that at least clarifies one thing for us. Avraham Avinu having a pact. If these are children of Ham, we have great difficulty with it. If on the other hand we are dealing with outsiders who come by boats, who are identified in Egyptian texts as those who came from the outside, from Yavan, descendants of Yefet, the idea of a partnership suddenly makes sense, because there was once a partnership between the two, between not Avraham and a descendant of Yefet, but rather Avraham's great-great-great-grandfather Shem, together with Yefet. When both of them have that ability to cover nakedness, they do so, and there's some kind of pact between the two. And Yefet has social beauty. Yefet has social beauty. Fine? Now, Avraham Avinu teaches Avimelech and teaches the world that social beauty, philosophy, all those things are good, but not enough. If you are lacking the fear of God, if you are lacking the understanding that there's a higher being that determines wrong from right, all those systems and all philosophies will collapse when there is very strong temptation. All these ideas and social order and the understanding that I can't do it if others can't do it will all vanish. Don't rely on secular philosophy. Look at Europe. Europe, which brought to the world the modern era philosophy. Look what Europe did in the 20th century. Look what Europe is doing, by the way, in the 21st century. That's what Europe is for you. That's what secular philosophy is. And that's what Avraham Avinu tells. If you remember, when he turns to Avimelech, and Avimelech says, "Why were you not honest with me? You know, you're among people like you. You could have identified the woman as your wife. We're not Egyptians. We're not descendants of Ham. We know how to, quote unquote, cover nakedness. We know how to overcome temptation, and we have social order." And Avraham Avinu responds, "Rak en yirat Elokim b'makom hazeh." What is lacking is yirah. That is what's lacking. You don't have the fear of God. You don't have the fear of God. All these things are good, right? And there's no question that we have a relationship. There's a partnership. We see eye to eye in the importance in overcoming temptation and as a result having social order. But that's not going to be long lasting. So now we appreciate a little bit what's happening between the two. And we understand very well why at the end of page 98, Avraham Avinu sees him as a partner. Because the partnership goes back to the covering of nakedness, correct? Now, yes?
If Shem and Yafet both did the same mitzvah, or they both covered them, was Shem more Yirah Shamayim than Yafet? Is that what we're saying?
He took, the way Chazal said is, he took a leading role. He took a leading role. Yafet continues, right? He follows his brother, recognizes it to be a right thing. But when Shem is the one that inspires others, he merits to have an Avraham Avinu. And he merits to, as we'll see soon, upgrade this social order which we call shlemut. In other words, Shem is a man that is very similar to Yefet. He believes in bringing people together. He believes in peace. He believes in shalom. He believes in shlemut. He believes in it. And he is the essence of shlemut. But due to the fact that he inspires his brother, so his brother is going to only remain at that state of social beauty, social order, secular philosophy, while Shem has a descendant that will upgrade it.
Where do we learn that difference between the two brothers? Because it says that they both went in.
One of the rabbis simply look at Yefet, according to many sources, was actually older. And if you look carefully at who took the lead in the covering of the nakedness, who took the lead? Shem is mentioned first. So him taking the lead. So the rabbis, perhaps they had a tradition that, and also one other detail, if you look carefully on page 44, when they go ahead and do it together, it does not say vayikhu. What does it say? Vayikach. That one of the singular indicates that one of them, and obviously the one mentioned first, is the one that takes the lead. He is the one that really gets the credit for it. Yefet participates, you merit to become an individual who covers nakedness, overcomes temptation, and creates social order, but with its limitations. Okay? Now, Yerushalayim itself has an early name. The early name of Yerushalayim in last week's portion was Shalem. It is a city of peace, and the king of the city of peace is, of course, Melchizedek, which according to tradition is Shem himself. He is alive. The numbers are clear in the text because he's a long-living individual. Shem himself is the king of Yerushalayim. He symbolizes peace. He symbolizes this idea of social order. All those things are wonderful. But now, after there is this partnership between Shem and Yefet, we are ready for the upgrade. In other words, if you remember again, Noach says both of them are blessed. Yefet has beauty. Ve'yishkon, but there's going to be a dwelling of God, a dwelling of the Creator in the tents of Shem. What is the tent of Shem? The tent of Shem, that where God dwells, obviously we are referring to the Bet HaMikdash. And therefore we are ready now to enter into the significance, or how that location becomes chosen, how Har HaMoriah becomes that ohel, that tent, where you're going to find the Shekhinah. So we know the story of Avraham Avinu going. And then we are told, let's turn to page 104, let's get to the end of the portion. And by the way, if indeed Avimelech is either impacted or an actual descendant of Yavan, Greece, and of Yefet, and Yefet does not take an active role, but rather he follows, he is nigrar after Shem, we have a little bit of an understanding at least of the name of his location, Avimelech, the king of Gerar. So there's a reference perhaps to that as well. On page 104, Avraham Avinu declares and gives another name to the Temple Mount, another name to the city. Right? You know, when you make your tour, when you go to Ir David, we had excellent tours in Ir David a few years ago, and you know very well that the city of Yerushalayim in the days of David HaMelech has nothing of the walled area. Nothing. The whole walled area is not part of the historical city. The city itself is only south of the Temple Mount, right? Silwan on one side. Jews are dealing with that sensitive area. To the north, there was a threshing floor. A round circular threshing floor. And it was owned by a fellow by the name of Aravna Hayevusi. And it turns into the location purchased by David HaMelech, eventually built by Shlomo HaMelech, into the Bet HaMikdash. There's always a relationship between the threshing floor and the Bet HaMikdash, because the Bet HaMikdash is a location of, as you mentioned, hora'ah, teaching. When you teaching the messages of our religion is very similar to the process of making bread. You know, there's something very absurd about the world. Think about it. When you look at a banana, you like bananas, right? Curious George, I don't know if you grew up on that, but you like bananas. Bananas are amazing because you have a soft, mushy substance. You give it to a kid and you have to clean for the next 45 minutes because it is soft, right? You give it one little chop and the next thing you know, it's everywhere. And nevertheless, the packaging is the most amazing packaging, the most amazing peel in the world. right? It's soft on the inside, rubber on the... It's just amazing about it. So it is as God creates this magnificent, if you want to call it a fruit, and you peel it and you eat it and it's preserved and it's ready to eat. And so too when it comes to any other item, from avocados to tomatoes. Bread, which is the fundamental element of a meal, is the one that Ravana Shalom decides that you have to go through 11 stages to prepare. Meaning, I have no doubt that if Ravana Shalom would have desired, he could have made a bread peel. And yes, you showed me in the past that there is a bread plant you discovered somewhere, I don't know where. In Jamaica was have a bread plant, but my feeling is that it does not exactly taste as good. I do enjoy a good bread, right? Whole wheat, of course. So,
No wheat.
well, no wheat nowadays. So, why is it that when it comes to bread, Rabbi Shalom says, no, okay, humans, you want bread? Oh, no problem. So you got to go ahead and you got to thresh it and you got to separate the pebbles and the chaff and milling. And the process is so complex, well, you'll tell me it's a part of the curse. Why specifically bread? Why did God not curse the land and say that if you want a banana, there are 11 stages to have a final banana? Why specifically bread? Well, bread is really the foundation of a meal, but it's also the foundation of our thought. And every detail in the process of preparing your loaf of bread is necessary and can apply to the process of coming up with justice. You want justice? Well, you have to know, I'll go ahead and break down. A scenario is presented in front of you, you have to break it down. You have to know how to separate elements that are just not relevant to the story. Right? A lot of times when we make decisions in life, the most important thing is to remove those things that are not significant. Then you have to go ahead and let it sit for some time. You know that in Judaism we're told that you have to wait with justice, right? You have to let it lahachmitz a little bit, because otherwise, if you're just going to jump to conclusions, they will not be the right conclusions. Everything with bread relates to justice. And if Har HaMoriah, the Temple Mount, is a place where you want humanity to recognize the justice and the laws of the Creator, it comes from a threshing floor. Now, threshing floors were always circular. Reason being, you would go ahead and you would place your oxen on these pieces of wood that have spikes on the bottom, a morag charutz as it's called, and you go ahead and you what's the village on Steels that they have? Pioneer Village. I don't know. Do they have threshing there? You don't know. Anyway, so we should have a tour once. We should have a class visit to figure out if they do have threshing. But you're going to it's going to be round because that's how you could have the motion of your oxen moving around and doing their process of threshing. It will always be on an elevated place because you want the wind to take the shaft. You want all that to occur. The Sanhedrin, which takes over the role of the threshing floor, is known as sitting in a semicircular, not in a complete one, because they have to be open to the world. A Sanhedrin, right? It's sitting in a semicircle. It's sitting like a rainbow. People have to.
It's called Goren.
It's called a garden, right? Chatzi Goren, exactly. It's a half threshing floor because it serves like a threshing floor, but you can't be closed. You can't be closed-minded. You have to see one another. It's very important for judges to see one another, right? When you don't see another person, you hear his opinion, you think, stupidity, ridiculous. You interact with someone, you make face-to-face eye contact with another person. Face-to-face interaction, you treat them differently, right? Someone who sends me an email that they want to go ahead and meet, that I should help them. An email is very easy. I'm sure I'm not the only one that has deleted with one click. But when a person comes to your face, a human being comes to you, it's very, very hard. There's a connection. A semicircle, but don't make it a complete circle. Don't be closed-minded. A semicircle means that we don't take into consideration anything that is occurring in the world. That's why justice comes from Har HaMoriah. But remember, there is also the understanding that it is a place where God observes. We develop the fear of God on Mount Moriah. And therefore, Avraham Avinu, let's see what Avraham Avinu on page 104, verse 14. Vaikra Avraham Shema Makomahu. He goes ahead, he takes what was known as Shalem up until now, and he gives it a new name. For Avraham Avinu, shalem is good. It's nice to have shalom. Shalom is magnificent. Shlamut, people getting along. Humanity recognizing that we're in essence all one. The human race, we are one. All those things are magnificent. But they're not going to last, and they're not the purpose. It is not enough. We have to have an understanding that there is a God that observes. That there is a God that yireh. Asher ye'omar hayom, that every single day the Jews coming to Jerusalem understand that this is not just a city of peace that brings us all together, but it is a city of where from that mountain, Behar Hashem Yira'eh, that God will be seen and is seen. He sees and we see Him, we interact with Him, and we develop a fear of God with an understanding of what that temple is. So Yerushalayim suddenly has two names, Shalem and Yirah. Yirah. And Avraham Avinu deserves to be the one to give it the first half of its name, and it is a city of Yirah, which you could either take the Aleph and Hey and combine them numerically, make it into a Vav, which is Yeru, or you could just take the Yeru itself, which really means Yirah. It is a city of Yerushalayim. Yeru, it is a city of vision, a city of observation, a city where we can recognize and relate to God, and we have an understanding that He knows what's occurring. And we develop Yirat Hashem because we know that God is Ro'eh, that God sees. And suddenly we upgrade. Our social order and our social beauty is all there, but it's enhanced because we understand that there's a higher being. That even when there is no one seeing, I'm not going to go ahead and hurt someone else, because I know it is not just this concept of social beauty, it's a concept of a higher being that knows what's happening. And it is through Jerusalem that there is a connection between the physical and spiritual world. So therefore, Yerushalayim is Yeru, Yirah, but it's also the city of Shalem. It is the city of peace. It is the city where humanity, right? We're not there yet, by the way, but humanity will recognize our role to Yerushalayim. Humanity will recognize that indeed it is making the greatest contribution ever by being a Jewish city, conveying Jewish messages. That is what Yerushalayim is all about. So we covered the partnership between Yefet and Shem, and we understand very well that right after the Torah describes their partnership, Ve'yishkon, remember in Parshas Noach? After there's a partnership, Ve'yishkon be'ohalei Shem. Then it is proper to describe in detail how the tent of Shem, the tent of Avraham, the tent of the Jewish people, the Bet HaMikdash, is the location of Shekhinah, because that is the result that occurs after partnership. So suddenly this section of the end of this week's portion makes sense and flows well, and we have a complete picture of what is occurring. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.